a couple, it is one thing. But when you are no longer a couple, it becomes more and more difficult. And it was actually quite hard to run the business with him anyway, even when we were together. And it just became more and more impossible
Yeah.
over the time that we were apart. And especially not being in London anymore and not being able to drop in unannounced and check up on things. And so I exited that business in 2018. The business is still running.
Wow.
Um, he's turned it into just a tattoo and body piercing studio. Ditched the clothing side. I was trying to figure out a way of exiting the business, knowing that I was basically paying his wages and he couldn't afford to buy me out.
Yeah. Did you have any of your money back by then?
Um, Debatable, not
Yeah.
really particularly. We paid off all of the debt
Well,
actually.
that's good.
So the business had paid off all of the debt. So I was debt free. And that was quite a funny thing, actually. Uh, I do think about this sometimes. Well, the business had basically paid back all of my credit card debt. So I was like ground zero by the end of 2014. And
Wow.
then 2015, we split up.
And what happened to Doug? We all want to know what happened to
We all
Doug.
want to know what happened to Doug. So Doug only had a 2-year visa,
Oh dear.
unfortunately. So
Yeah.
he went back to Australia, and his idea was always to go back to Oz to set up his own
Yeah.
studio, which he did. Because it was like running our studio was a dry run for his own business.
Yeah.
So he was
Nice.
very, very entrepreneurial. And I said, well, look, you treat this like, you were setting up your own business. He knew how to run a studio, but he didn't know anything about business. So we did a little bit of a symbiotic thing where he would come to me with, questions.
Questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would talk to him about the business side of things, and he would teach me really about how to run a studio. And I said, treat it as a dry run for when you go back home and do your own thing. And that's what he did. And now I think I haven't seen him for years, but he's in Ireland. Him and his wife are in Ireland, and they have their own studio. He has his own studio there, I think.
Oh, you should get in
So
touch and good. What I'm finding with these interviews is it's making people remember things.
yeah,
And Philippa,
totally.
who I interviewed yesterday, she actually had got, ended up getting in touch with one of the first people who gave her one of her first jobs. So
It's crazy. And then,
yeah,
yeah, and so I exited the business in 2018. I actually gave the business to my ex
yeah,
because I knew that he
nice and
couldn't buy
clean.
me out. And I was just like, look, I
You just wanted to walk away, didn't you?
I just wanted to walk away. I wanted to walk out of, get away. And actually, the universe answered I was trying to figure out a way of making it work. And I was putting it off and putting it off. And then I got a letter from the landlord to say that actually we were being evicted from this premise that we'd had because we had a
Again,
rolling lease
yeah.
again. And we'd moved in 2007 and this was 2018. So we'd had a good run of it. But finally, they'd decided that actually that was all going to be redeveloped and it was all going to be demolished and we had to move. And I thought, do you know what? This is a really good opportunity for me. And I said to him, look, this is what's happening. We can either wind up the business, shut the whole thing down, or you can just take it and do what you want,
Mm.
really. You can have the stock, the staff, the systems, the mailing list,
The
the
headaches.
website. Basically, you can have all of it. And it was making a
Wow,
profit
that's
by
really
that
that's
time. It
actually
was a
really
profitable
generous.
business. Well, he doesn't think so still. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Because I gave him everything apart from the relatively small amount of money that was in the bank account. Um, because otherwise I would have had nothing.
And nothing.
Um,
Well, and you. I mean, were you paying the interest on that debt all that time? Or did the
yes,
business
yes.
assume
The
it?
business, no, the business was paying for
All
it. The
right.
business was paying for it. But I took minimum wage for the
Me too.
entirety of the business.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's by the by.
You must have learnt lessons from doing
I
that.
learned some very big lessons in that even if you lay it out for some people are just never really going to appreciate
Yeah.
um, what you've done. And I think I think one of the things with, with the advent of social media and all of that, I think like I learned to let go of stuff
Yeah.
because there's huge parts of me that want to actually say, well, actually, this is how it was and this is how it went down. But, you can't really say those things publicly on social media. You've got to be very mindful, very careful, even when, people have, misled others about how things are.
Yeah.
That was one of the big things for me, just letting it go, just let it go, let it go,
Yeah. So
let
you
it go.
moved to, where did you say you moved to?
The New Forest. So I'm on the edge of the New Forest, just south of Salisbury. I'm 7 miles south of Salisbury.
Okay.
So
What
yeah.
pulled you down there? Was there anything in specific? And did you sell
Not
your house in
really.
Croydon or?
No, I've still got the house in Croydon. I rent that out. I've got my I'm an accidental landlord now.
That's a bit
Um
harder.
yeah, so I there was not a particular reason other than I knew I wanted to be out of London. I didn't know where I wanted to live, but I did have and my partner wanted to move out of London. We both wanted to move out of Croydon, to be honest. And because I think it's really hard, like if you are a couple, if you're running a business as a couple and everybody knows, and it's a community led business, which ours was,
Yeah.
when that dynamic is no longer working, and every kind of like everywhere you go, it's that neither of you can move on.
Yeah.
um and I'd stepped away from the business, so I was the one who probably had to step away and
Move on.
make a fresh start.
Yeah.
And it was time, and I'd wanted to move out of Croydon for a really long time, didn't know where I wanted to be. Anyway, like my partner had a friend down in Barton-on-Sea, on the coast here, and then I've got a friend who is in White Parish, so just on the edge of the New Forest, and we'd come through the forest to visit these two friends on different occasions. Like, it's actually really nice here. It's lovely, why don't we? And honestly, I didn't want to buy anywhere. I didn't want to let go of my house, and so we just decided one day to look on Rightmove, pick 5 properties that fit the bill to rent,
Mhm.
and then drive up one Saturday morning, look at all 5 and just pick one
Make a decision and
and
get
make a
down.
decision. And
Yeah.
so we just picked one, the best of the bunch, and
It's a starting point.
moved as a starting point. And we lived there for 8 months, wasn't ideal. And then we found the place that we're in now, and we moved here again another sort of stepping stone. But that was back in 26. That was December 2016. And we absolutely love it. It's on a farm, it's in the middle of nowhere, it's on a private estate.
I remember hearing
Um,
some of this from Judith.
yeah, so it's on a private estate. So you wouldn't even know that we're here. There's like 8 cottages, I think, here. There's a manor that's owned by 2 sisters, and it's a working farm. They rent the fields to a beef farmer. Everybody's lovely. Most of the people that live here have lived here long term. They'd want long-term tenants. We don't really want to move. And I was thinking, I thought of you actually, because you were a long-term tenant for a while, weren't you, in a place?
I still am. I still
Oh,
rent.
you still are? Okay, yeah, because there
Yeah.
was always this thing of like, oh, you've got to buy. We have this thing in the UK, we've got to own our own houses. And I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was you, maybe it was Judith or someone else. It doesn't matter if you don't, if you don't own your own
If
home,
you
as
don't
long as you
live in
own
your own
somebody
in your
else's.
own property, yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
was a very big deal in the money, Jim, was to work out financially what was best for you and gave you your life goals. And for me, I've got all my money in other investments because they're
exactly.
in a part of the wealth creation cycle that is going up, whereas I believe property is about to go down. It's, even though Savills have said it's going to go up 25% in the next 5 years, there's a massive financial crash coming, just like, well, worse than the one in 2008. So I'd really rather have my money in things that are likely to go up during a financial crash rather than things that are likely to go down. So I
Yeah.
just rent. I've got an amazing flat. It looks out over the river in Shoreham. I've got incredible views of the water. Couldn't possibly, I mean, it's 500,000 to buy one of these 2-bedroom flats here.
Right. So this was the other thing that I was saying, I've said to a lot of people, the house that I live now, it's a detached house. We're surrounded by fields. If I were to buy something like this, I don't even know how. I mean,
You'd be
you don't
putting
even
all your capital into something that you
exactly.
have to maintain, and you probably wouldn't be able to afford the location you're in at the moment.
No, wouldn't be able to afford the location and definitely wouldn't be able to afford the type of property. And also, I did the maths on it and like I'm 54 years old and
You
when you look
certainly
at
don't look it.
when you look at the interest and I added up the mortgage so we'd have to my partner would have to sell his flat in because he's still got his property in Croydon that he rents out.
And
So
those
we've got
properties are going up far more in value than anything down
right.
the country would.
So we've got two properties that we're renting out. The houses of this size and they're just so expensive around here. And
Yeah.
also, if we decided, oh, we wanted to downsize or move, these sorts of big properties are not selling
They
very
don't sell.
quickly.
No,
They're
exactly.
hard to shift.
Mm.
Also, the location, we're on a private family generational estate. Like we would literally not be able to buy this house. They just
No,
don't leave the
no.
family. And to buy something like this, you'd be looking in the millions even to get the sort of land that we've got. And
Do you
we make,
garden? Are you growing things?
yeah, so we've got an outdoor wood-fired sauna cabin
Oh,
on
nice.
in the garden. We've
Wow.
got we've got three, soon to probably be five vegetable plots.
Uh-huh.
And that doesn't even disturb the lawn, you know. My partner does now, he does a lot of woodwork, he does a lot of home renovations, that kind of thing. And he's got a workshop. One of the units, one of the sort of old barns on the farm is like he's renting that
Oh, amazing.
for his
Yeah.
work. And he's got a shepherd, he's actually refurbing a shepherd's hut at the moment to sell. And
Yeah.
that's parked outside the by some hay bales on the farm. We get on really, really well with the landowners here, the farmer. It just, and then I rent a studio. So I teach perfume making classes in person now. Majority of what I do is online. And that was intentional. I launched my first online course for my perfume making stuff in 2013, actually. But I didn't really do much with it because I was still very much in the retail business and I was still very much teaching in-person classes in London. And that was like my nice little thing to tick me over. And I wasn't really treating it like a proper business. But when we moved to the forest, I realized that I didn't want to go lugging all
Schlepping
my
out to
gear into
London.
London.
Yeah.
And it was actually quite hard to get people down here. And so I thought, you know what, 2016, 2017, I'm going to go all in on online.
Wow.
So I went all in on online. And then, and this is going to make you laugh, the end of 2019, um, I was like, do you know what? I'm really feeling I've been focused online. I haven't really done many in-person classes. 2020 is going to be the year for me where I'm going to
Oh,
do
no.
all go back to full in-person classes. And I found a studio that was an old converted stable on not on our farm, but it's on another kind of landowner's
Yeah.
estate. There's a stately home called Bremer House, and it's a they the Hulse family own Bremer House stately home. They've got like a museum and a farm shop, and then they've got loads of cottages and other farms dotted around. They're a big landowner. But I found this property, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got to have it. I must have it. And this is where I'm going to do all my workshops, and I'm going to go back to in person. And I got the keys. We did it up. My other half did it up and we did I did my first in-person class in January 2020,
Oh my
completely
God.
sold out.
Oh.
And then March came around and it was tumbleweeds and it was like, yeah, then that was that.
Oh, what did you do?
So I turned it into a recording studio for my online classes. So I'd already put the groundwork into my online courses and people said to me, how can you teach perfume making online? You know, you can't do that because people have got to smell everything. And I'm like, there has got to be a way. There is a way. I can teach the theory, I can teach the experience, and I can give people the resources to go source their own materials.
This
I
is
can teach
fantastic. I had
I
no
can
idea
teach
this
people
story
how
was
to
going to go like this.
evaluate their own, like rather than relying on me telling them whether it's good enough or not, how can I teach them how to self-evaluate? How can I teach them how to be confident in their own practice? How can I teach them to be confident in creating for themselves, you know? And so I really leaned into a lot of the mindset stuff in my programs, as well as, so it's not just perfume making, it was the business side of it, it was the social media side, it was the mindset, it was the all of the stuff that I'd learned over the course of my life in personal development and running other types of business, I
Mm.
put into that, and really kind of went down the rabbit hole of learning how to build funnels, and did the old Brunson one funnel away
Yeah,
thingamy.
that one funnel challenge was absolutely brilliant. I learnt a lot through going through
Yeah.
that. And I'd already had sort of 10, 15 years.
Right. And so a lot of it, when I went through it, was like, oh, yeah, I remember the stuff that we'd done with Brett McFall back in
Yeah.
2007. And it wasn't rocket science. It wasn't anything new, but it was like I had a different lens to see it through, where I could actually see how I could use it within my business to make a difference. And I started doing launches. I started doing webinar launches, and nobody was doing webinar launches for perfume
No. It's a
making,
bit
and I
like when
don't think they
I was
are
running,
still.
bit like when I was running Google AdWords for my bed and breakfast. Nobody in the whole area was running Google ads for their bed and breakfast.
No.
When you can take a tool like that and bring it to a new market, it just opens up so many possibilities. I'm so thrilled to hear all this. I can't tell you.
And so I learned so much from those days, but it was all I learned so much. And one of the things that I learned actually was how to pivot,
Yeah,
how to be resilient, the whole E-myth thing where, do what is in your zone of genius, wear all the hats at the beginning, you have to do that. But then like think about how to outsource
yeah,
slowly and gradually to people who are better at those things than
yeah.
you are. Also, doing something, creating a business. And this was the thing that I didn't mention from the time bomb days, is that I realized through coaching, through, the mistakes that I made along the way, that one of the most important things is to make sure that when you are creating a business, you're not doing it just because you can. And it's like, I think that I wrote a blog post about it once, and I called it the curse of the creative woman, although it applies to men obviously too, that, creative types have lots of ideas, and a lot of us are very, very competent at a lot of things.
Mm.
And just because, and this was a Judithism, probably, I think, who knows, just because you can, it doesn't mean you should.
Oh, I used
And
to say that
so
all the
you
time.
used to say that all the time as well. So it was definitely from those days.
Yeah,
And what I realized was with Time Bomb, it's like I created that business because I could. I don't know, it just was an idea and a whim, and I started it, and that was that. And then I woke up one day to realize that I'd created a prison for myself because
yeah,
I hadn't really thought through what is the life that I want to live? What is my place of joy? Do I really know what I'm getting myself into? Um, i.e., I never liked working 9 to 5. I didn't want to work for, I didn't want to have to show up every day and put my game
yeah.
face on. And if that is not you, and if you're not I'm an introvert, I didn't even know what that was at the time. I learned all of those things through doing something where I had to show up and put my game face on 24/7, 7 days a week. And I was absolutely burnt out, exhausted, broken because it wasn't what I'm naturally. I could do it. Of course, I could do it. I was competent at it, but it wasn't what made me happy.
That this confident introvert thing is something that I've realised over the years. I always thought of myself as an extrovert, but I'm not. I'm someone who it takes a lot out of me. I used to come back from those workshops and I used to have to not speak to anyone for 3 days, and I think it's a new thing that sort of people are realising now that if you can, you've got to find a way of having a business that works for you in your personality type and your strengths and your skills. I mean, you've mentioned it several times, things that bring you joy.
Yeah. I think the that's an interesting, the confident introvert. I didn't really even know what an introvert or an extrovert was at the time, because I don't think it was the sort of conversations that we
No, of course,
had.
let's talk about it.
But people, I I don't know. I think because I worked in retail, I thought that was what I loved, being around people. But actually, I discovered that. I found it really exhausting. And I thought for many, many years there was something wrong with me
Yeah.
because I would just get so tired and feel so burnt out. And I thought, oh my God, maybe I've got ME, maybe I've got, yuppie flu as they called it at the time. Maybe
Yes.
I've got like
Yes.
some autoimmune, maybe I'm ill. And I honestly thought maybe I'm ill because I can't do this like other people can do this.
Yeah.
And but then I'm like, well, I don't feel very introverted because I'm not shy. I'm not like I'm confident. I don't feel anxious. I've never had anxiety. I
I
don't
could get on stage in front of 1,000 people quite happily, and
yeah.
that was my thing. Yeah. But
And
then
so it was like I didn't know what it was. And then when I really started to understand that actually the introversion thing, it's more about the energy, whether something gives you energy or saps your energy. I'm like, oh
exactly
my
right.
God, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It like going to run a workshop, it doesn't necessarily give me energy. Like it makes me happy. I enjoy it while I'm in it. It's fun, but I don't want to do it every day.
No.
And actually, I need to have downtime after I've done it. So if I do like a 3 day workshop, so I run a 3 day perfume making class now. So I can do a 3 day class, but then I'll need to take a couple of days out and just not speak to anyone
Yeah.
because I
And the other
give
thing
it
I
my all.
the other thing I find that really made the difference was I used to do a lot of workshops on my own, and didn't really, I mean, I enjoyed them in the moment, but I used to dread them. But doing it with other people helped enormously. So Judith would be the person who made sure that everyone was happy and everything was running right. Steve used to deal with all the tech and the food and make sure all that was good. And all I had to do was pitch up and be brilliant. So that was really great fun. But as soon as I had to go back to doing it on my own again, it wasn't great fun anymore. And I'd much rather do, something like this or something, again, speaking to 1,000 people on stage or speaking to 1,000 people online. Perfectly fine with that. Love that. Doesn't take any energy at all.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting thing. I mean, I teach it on my own, but what I do is I have very small groups. So my group classes now are 8 people max, so they're
Okay.
6 to 8 people, whereas when I was doing them in London they were like 15,
Yeah,
17. They
that's
were
quite
bigger, they
training.
were bigger groups, and I found them very exhausting.
And how often
um
do you do them now, Karen?
Not so, and actually that's the other thing, it's like not massively often. So I do 5 1 day classes a year, and I do 2 or 3 3 day classes a
Okay.
year.
Do you use them to test new ideas out for the stuff you put online? A bit like a comic when they go out on a small tour.
No, not at all, actually. It's a kind of a rinse and repeat class. So it's got a structure, and it is what every class is going to be slightly different depending on the audience.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do ask questions. And I think because I've been doing this for so long now, so what are we now in 2024? So I've been teaching 14 years, and
Yeah.
essentially I've been teaching the same two in-person classes over and over again. But because they're very practical, people had come to them more than once, so the theory will be the same. And I've refined them over the time that I've been doing them. The class that I taught back in 2010 is not the same as the class that I
No.
teach now because I've improved it, I've cut things out, I've added things in. I don't really test out new material, because they are very there's only so you've got to keep them very timed and tight
Yeah,
because
of course.
there's only so much you can get in with a very, very big topic. But what I do more is test out new material with my online audience. And so I have a mastermind group. So
Okay.
the program that I created back in 2013, which was a 6 module online course, now is my year-long mastermind program. So
Okay.
I've grown that over the years. And so that core group, um, they tell me what they want, what they don't, what they need my help with. I see the questions that come up time and time and time and time again. And so then I would say, okay, right, we're going to do a masterclass on this. And then I will put that out to my audience and then sell it as a small standalone. And then I'll probably incorporate it into the mastermind in some way. I
Okay.
launched last July, I launched my own podcast. So
Oh, excellent.
yeah, so the perfume making podcast does what it says on the tin.
That's brilliant. So have you got a YouTube channel?
I have, but I don't use it really.
Okay.
It's one of the things that really I've always known that trips me up is that doing video is I just find it really difficult. I really struggle with doing video. I do lives, I can talk to people. I hate doing 1 minute TikToks.
Oh yeah, really,
Like
I can't
one
get into
minute
that.
TikToks,
Can't get into it at all.
YouTube
Although it's easy to
videos.
reset it, yeah.
If I'm interviewing someone or someone's interviewing me, I'm more than happy to be on camera, not a problem. But
Yeah.
actually creating vid content to fit within the constraints of video,
Yeah,
it's
it's too hard.
just
Yeah.
it's for me it's too hard. So I
Is
do
your
an
podcast
audio
audio
only.
then?
Yeah, it's just audio only. And the guys who edit and produce that for me have I mean, I literally got a WhatsApp today saying, "Oh, we're just checking in to see whether, you want to upgrade to our video package." And I'm like, "No, because I know that I wouldn't want to do it.
You wouldn't want to do it,
I
yeah.
wouldn't want to do it because it is a bit like making sure the lighting's right, making sure your makeup's on, your hair's done and all of that. And I think part of me over the years, if I'm showing up live, I kind of let the perfectionist bit go. I just like let it go. It's
I
fine.
totally let
However I
that go.
look and however it is how it is.
Yeah.
But I know that if I'm having to record content to a script or to keep myself within a set piece of a structure of a content with call to action or content with I just find it too hard to do the face to camera stuff. And I think a lot of what I teach, a lot of what I talk about on my podcast as well, I do some interviews, but the majority of it is a how to solo show. And
Mm.
so unless I've got slides on the screen, I'm literally just talking head, and that doesn't really work on YouTube. And so if you've got a back and forth conversation, or if you cut so what they've suggested to me is we can still do the talking head, but we can cut it with B-roll, we can intersperse it with B-roll. That cool, that would be fine. But again, it's still a little bit of a not quite sure about that yet.
Yeah, I do think it would work for your business brilliantly, but I also think if you don't enjoy it, don't do it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and I'm sure, I still get traffic. I've got a
I
few
was gonna
videos up
ask
on
you,
YouTube.
how do you get leads to your online business?
Well, I'm in the process. I've literally just hired someone to sort out my Google Analytics for me so that I actually know.
Do you host all your material on your own website then?
Well, I do kind of. Yeah. So I'm in a bit of a mishmash. I think like any entrepreneur,
It's
who's
grown up
cobbled
over
stuff
time.
together over the years. I've got a WordPress website. I've got my social media channels. I have got YouTube. I still get traffic from YouTube. So
Okay.
videos that I put up back in 2013 still get me traffic. I've got my Instagram account that drives traffic. I did set up a TikTok channel a year and a half ago, sort of fell off the wagon with TikTok, but I still get because of the way TikTok works as almost like a YouTube type long tail SEO type of a thing. I still get people. I haven't posted a video on TikTok for a long time, but people are still following me, liking and commenting on my videos in the same way that they do with YouTube. I get traffic from Pinterest. I've got someone who just set up a Pinterest account for me.
Yeah, I was going to say I would think Pinterest would be good
Yeah,
for you.
Pinterest is huge. I think that's my biggest following is on Pinterest,
Okay.
weirdly enough. I don't even touch it really. Yeah, so my traffic really comes from all of my social media channels. It now also comes from my podcast because I do get found on that
Yeah.
organically
And
because
where
the
do you host
guys
the podcast?
it's on a platform called Omni Studio.
If
Um,
you've got an RSS feed for that, you
yeah,
can put it on your YouTube channel as a podcast.
yeah, I've been advised not to do that. I've been
Oh,
told
have
by
you?
my agency that I work with not to do that.
Okay.
And so the reason I was told not to do that is because the negatives outweigh the benefits in that situation. Because I get a certain amount of downloads every month on my podcast, all my episodes. However, what they have told me is that you will get less reach on YouTube than you do on your podcast app because if you are doing an audio only and you just put that up on YouTube, you won't get as many views or listens on YouTube as you will on your podcast app. But the difference is the listens on YouTube are, or views, as it were, are visible publicly, whereas the ones on the podcast app are not. And so, for example, I think my stats for, I mean, some of my episodes have got 3,000 listens. My overall last month we had about 8,500 downloads for, which is not huge, but for a relatively niche and fairly new podcast, I'm pretty happy with it. But I know that on YouTube I probably would get a fraction of that. And so what they've said to me is that people will see that and think that you've got not many, your podcast isn't that popular. And you're not getting as many. So they've said to me that it's a negative. So unless you do a video and really put your work into growing that as a channel, it isn't worth it.
Okay. Well, they're the experts, so you trust them, and you've got to listen to their advice. I mean, the only thing I would say is that YouTube is now the biggest podcast platform in the world, even beating Apple.
Yeah, so they might change their view on that. They may well do. But I mean, for the moment, that's why I haven't.
I put Own It, the podcast, up there, all 287 episodes of it, because we didn't want to keep paying for hosting, and we wanted to keep it, but we didn't want, and all we had to do was feed the RSS feed through, and it automatically went onto YouTube. And it's, well, obviously Judith dying very sadly has boosted the listens, because people are going back to the beginning now and going again. But it was already outdoing any other platform that I was tracking.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I'm never say never, because I did think of doing that.
Yeah, I think about your own podcast. I mean, my own podcast, I listen to things with Overcast when I'm going to sleep most of the time. But if I'm awake and I'm listening to a podcast, I probably would go to YouTube to put it on.
So I use Spotify. I wouldn't. I very rarely
Spotify
use
as well, but only for Joe Rogan.
Right. Yeah. I don't really use YouTube for anything.
I'm not a YouTube. Can't stand the ads on Spotify, and won't pay for ad free just for one or two podcasts. But I do pay for ad free on YouTube, so I don't get any ads listening to podcasts.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe. So what they suggested to me anyway is to take each piece of each podcast episode and create a 10-minute segment.
That's a good idea, to test it.
And test it. But also what they want me to do actually is to film every new podcast I record from now on in, to just film it. So
that's why I'm doing these interviews on Zoom, so that they're video as well as audio.
But I haven't done that because I prefer to do audio. I like audio. I just I don't know.
All of what we've been talking about today is about building a business to love and sticking to it, but trying new things just as an experiment for fun. And so tell me, I've got 3 questions for you. I could talk to you for hours, obviously, but time's running out. What's been the high point of your career today, and what's been the low point of your career today?
Oh,
your entrepreneurial journey.
Oh my Lord. I think there have been lots of low points. I think every business owner has lots of low points because it is that sort of up and down. I think the low point, actually, the first thing that comes to mind is the low point was realizing that I had created a business for someone else and not for myself. And that I had put a lot of time and energy and money and blood, sweat and tears and life into something that wasn't in alignment for me, and it wasn't actually for me. I'd created a business for someone else essentially. So realizing that was kind of a bit of a, oh God, what did I do? Because I did it for a long, long time. And then I think the high point, oh God, there've been loads of high points as well.
That's good, isn't it?
I don't know necessarily whether there's like one major high point. I think probably getting that first book deal, manifesting that first book deal was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, but actually, I think the high, no, do you know what? Actually, the real high, a more recent high point actually is that I get so many emails from people now in my perfume business that so my target audience is, we niche, you kind of find your niche over time. And the people that really I help now, for the most part, are people who really who have a dream of starting their own business, doing something creative, making perfume and turning it into a business or a side hustle, or actually even just learning how to make a fragrance that they love and they're happy with in an industry that has told them historically that you can't do that unless you follow a very specific path, or you have been to this school, or you are part of this elite group. Um, and I, through my podcast, actually, more so than my courses, I mean, I get loads of lovely emails from my courses and I've got students who give me feedback in real time. But I think the podcast reaches more people because it's free and I don't hold back on that podcast. I teach on that
Yeah.
podcast. And I know that, my programs are relatively high ticket. And I know that I can't help everyone through that method because not everybody is going to be able to afford the time that it takes to complete that, or the money to sign up and work with me closely. But the high points are those emails from people that have said, "Oh my God, I've been listening to your podcast from the beginning. I've listened to every single episode and I have learned so much from you. And you've really helped to make me feel that I can actually do this."
That's
And so
amazing.
I think the high points will always be, for me, um, knowing that I've empowered people to have some sense of freedom, whatever it looks like for them. And actually, I think that that is one of my core values is freedom, which I think it is for many of us. And I know Judith had that as a core value for sure. And a lot, well, pretty much, anybody who was involved in the money gym in those
Yeah.
days, it was all about freedom,
Of
right? It
course.
was being able to do what you want on your own terms and have the freedom to make your own money and what have you. So whatever that looks like for them, um, yeah, enabling people to have that freedom of
Yeah.
choosing one, whether they just want to make a perfume for themselves. So choosing what goes into their product that they put on their skin so they actually don't have to buy it off the shelf. Or if they want to do it as a business, they can do that. And I always say that, I'm one of the things that I've learned is I'm a teacher first because people always say to me, "Oh, well, why have you not got your own perfume brand, your own perfume range?" And I've never done that. I've never created one for myself. I've tussled with it over the years, and there are so many reasons why I haven't. But one of them was, if I kept coming out of my bricks and mortar business, Time Bomb, the last thing I wanted was to be tied down with stock and, things and
Yeah.
stuff that I had to sell. So that from the beginning. And then as I've moved more into, being an expert in this realm, and, it would be relatively painless probably to start my own brand now. And, I teach other people how to do it and what have you, and I could do that. But actually, the thing that brings me joy and the thing that lights me up is the teaching part. And this is one of the things that I
Changing
always say
people's
to
lives, aren't
people.
you? You're changing people's
Yeah,
lives.
I can reach more people by teaching other people how to do the thing than just doing the thing myself.
Yeah. It's like everyone says to me, why don't you start another agency to do digital marketing? Because I don't, I'd rather teach people, I'd rather empower people to be able to do their own
Exactly.
digital
It's
marketing.
about free. So one of the things is about freedom. So I don't want to be
Yeah,
tied down to like,
totally.
things and stuff and warehouses of stock. But also, I want to be able to empower people as well. And I think if you are creating a product and selling someone a unit, a widget, or whatever, that's great. And that might change their life and they might have a lovely experience with it. But
They'll
it's
smell good.
not, yeah, and smell good, but it's not ticking the empowering other people
Yeah.
box for me. And I trained back in 2018, actually, I trained as a meditation teacher because I really wanted to delve into that a bit more for my own spiritual practice. And I did actually kind of come up with a few ideas for product lines back in 2010 before I kind of took the teaching route. And I wanted to delve into that. And I always knew that there was going to be an element of mindset and spirituality and self-care and well-being. And, I've also created some programs around that for my audience as well. So one of the big things that fascinated me about scent was how it affects our well-being and our mindset and how it
I
can
put some on
shift your
today.
mood.
I'm here all on my own, just had a shower, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to put some perfume on, and it really
Yeah.
made me feel nice.
And so I created a program around that called the Scent Shift, which melds my, knowledge of scent and fragrance marketing specifically, and how it all works in the industry, and psychology and mindset and meditation, melded the two together as a kind of a well-being pathway. So even if people don't want to make perfume, they don't want to do anything like that, they can still use it as a tool for their own kind of well-being and transformation as well. And so one of the things that it really, all of this stuff really taught me was that, I'm a teacher first. So I could teach mindset, well-being, I could teach business, I could teach marketing, I could teach all sorts. And the reason that I landed on perfume making is because that was what my career was in. That was what I was an expert in
Yeah,
when I first started.
yeah.
Like, now, 14 years later, having run two businesses and having done all of that personal development and having learned all of those other things, of course, we have other strings to our bow, but yeah, it's teaching first, teaching, empowering others. And I think the online world gives us so much more ability and freedom to do that
Yeah.
than we had back in the day when we were all running analog businesses and having to tramp the streets to give out flyers.
So what's next for you? What have you got anything that you'd really like to achieve in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I really want to yeah, I want to actually delve more into the well-being side
Mhm.
of my business. So, and actually, what I want to do really is not step away from the perfume thing, but I know that I've spent the last 14 years building a personal brand that is much more than just fragrance.
Yeah,
And I want to start exploring other things, and I don't know what that looks like yet, particularly, but I am going to be doing my advanced meditation teacher training. And so I definitely think that it is going to involve some kind of well-being, personal development type of a thing. Fragrance will always creep in somewhere along the line. But yeah, I do want to, yeah, create another business that is more of a well-being business rather than a teaching people how to make perfume to launch a brand kind of business, if that makes sense.
I get it. I get it entirely. Karen Gilbert, what a pleasure it's been to talk to you again and to catch up on all these years that have gone past and to reminisce with someone who knew Judith and
Yeah.
who, Judith had such a big impact on their life. And it's been a real pleasure. And thank you very much for stepping up when I asked for willing victims.
Thanks so much. I was just one of those things. I saw the post at the right time,
Yeah,
right time and right place. And hats off to Judith. I think Judith brought a lot of people together.
you did.
Um,
Amazing
and
like that. She brought groups of
yeah,
people together.
and actually, continues to do that with her passing as well, because I connected with so many people that I hadn't seen for years,
Yeah.
well, including yourself. And it was just that little trigger of memories. And I think that Judith's memory and her sort of way of being, actually, there are so many touch points in my life that I remember during this conversation with you that were heavily influenced by things that she'd said or people that she'd introduced me to or events that we'd gone to that she would, had helped facilitate. And I do think that that's something that's a massive legacy
Yeah,
that
and
she,
that's why I think people are going back to the podcast on. If you go to
yeah,
YouTube and search "Own It," the podcast, you'll find it.
yeah.
And that's the way to have captured a bit of a tiny bit of a magic, really.
Right. And I think that is such a that's a goal, to have that kind of legacy, I think.
Yeah, it
And I
is.
think that is the beauty of today's world with digital, with online, with podcasts, actually, because, you know, we can immortalize, we can immortalize people, can't we,
Yeah,
in that?
that's awesome, Karen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicola. It was so lovely to connect with you again after all these years. Thank you
Yes,
for inviting me.
stay happy, keep gardening. See you later.
Bye
Bye.
for now.